Hey, good people. Grits or cream of wheat? Who the hell is racist? Does anyone ever ask could they touch your hair?
Black Like Me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G., a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Black Like Me.
Hey, everyone. This is Alex G, and I want to welcome you back to another exciting episode of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. All right, so you know this. You've been listening to the show. This is season 3, so you understand by now I'm black. And so I think in black. I process things in black. And so I want to talk to you about something that just happened in my hometown in Madison. And I just want to give you just a little bit how I view this scenario. So there's a church here in Madison. This is in the news. I'm not telling anyone's private business. That's called Lion of Judah. Strong biblical name. You know, I can get down with that. But there was a raid on Lion of Judah Church because they are using marijuana as sacraments. It is a Rastafarian church. A Rastafarian church that's serving and selling marijuana, weed, as sacrament. But wait, it gets better. The two pastors, the two leaders are white men. First of all, let's just talk about white privilege for a second. No, we're going to talk about white privilege for like the next 3 minutes. First of all, a white Rastafarian church. I mean, black people can't have nothing. So it's a white Rastafarian church. I'm sure they got dreads. The quotes in the article show a very strong Jamaican accent. And so these white men are leading a church called Lion of Judah. They've got an established church. They got $40,000 in the bank. And as a new church, I got a lot of friends who are church starters. We call them church planners, who would love to have $40,000 in the bank. So the police come and they raid them. They come outside. They're talking. They go to jail. They come back. And the men go right back to the church and start selling it again. So breathe, Alex, breathe. First of all, if Tyrone and Lip Maine and Mookie were standing inside a facility inside my church smoking weed, they would go to jail. I would go to jail. They would go get my mom out of her memory care facility. She would go to jail. They would get my daughter out of grad school. She would go to jail. My wife works in the office. They would go to jail. Listen, jails have been filled, particularly in 70s and 80s during the war on drug movement, with black people because of the possession of weed. These white men are posing with bags of weed next to police cars. And of course, they're going to jail and they're getting right back out. But so first of all, white people, I need you to listen. Listen, turn up the volume, push those earbuds a little further in your ear. This is the stuff that black people watch and they say, what the hell? What is going on? First of all, did anybody get beat with a club? Did anybody get maced? Did anyone get tased? Did anyone get shot? Was anyone threatened? I know hundreds of black pastors. We can even imagine, just for moral reasons, societal reasons, psychological reasons, why we wouldn't want to be selling weed as sacrament. Like, okay, if we did decide to have like a weed small group in my church, I wouldn't call it sacrament. That's like really pushing it. I would just call it recreational. We just sitting around and we just getting buzzed. So I'm not going to use something that's non-theological that we're going, talking about bringing in the weed. We shall come rejoicing, bringing in the weed. We're not going to do that. We're just going to sit around and listen to gospel music and get high. We're going to do something like that. But we're not going to call it. We're not going to say this is the body of Christ. This is the cup of salvation. Okay, because that's going too far. That's really going too far, particularly. But let me tell you something, though, because we got people listening all over the world. Weed is not legal in Wisconsin. It's not legal in any state that touches us. Illinois is flirting with it, and they might do it. Minnesota, you certainly can't do it. And we kind of touched the corner of Iowa, but Iowa's not doing it. Okay, so in a state where marijuana possession is not legal, these white men come out and talk to the media. They're not on the ground. They're not on their faces. They're not handcuffed. Nobody's kneeling in their backs. Nobody's yelling at them. They go to jail and come back and do it again. They can call it a sacrament. They got a bank account at Summit Credit Union. Now, granted, Summit, may not know what their business is, but I'm just saying you all, first of all, white Rastafarians, What the hell are white people thinking? Y'all just want it all. Y'all just want everything. You don't want the ass whoopings, and you don't want the profiling. You don't want people to follow you around in the stores, and you don't want to be called the N-word, and you don't want your kids called it in the school. But you want to twist your hair, and you want to smoke a joint, and you want to do it in the name of my Lord Jesus, and then stand outside and be bold about it and have the flexibility because you thinking they're not going to do nothing to me. They're not going to do nothing to me. Black people stand around and they watch this and they say, it must be great to be white in America. You can become anything you want to be, including a white Rastafarian. Or you can go to the tanning booth and you can be a white woman and get an appropriations hairdo and become the head of the NAACP out in the Northwest. White people can do anything they put their minds to. It's just an insight I'm having today. Ooh, speaking of insights, I recently appeared on a podcast because, sometimes we do this as podcast hosts. We will appear on another show. My colleague Dick Goldberg has a podcast that's called Insights. And so he asked me to be his guest to talk about justified anger, the work that I'm doing in eradicating racial disparities. And it was a really honest conversation. And the conversation with him proved to me that there are so many things that white folks and non-black people really want to know about the black experience, black thought, black speak. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to be raw. It's his show, but he recorded it in my studios. So I decided not to hold back. And so here's a raw version of an interview that I gave for the show Insights. I'd love to know what you think. Enjoy this next episode.
If you're white and think you pretty well understand what it means to be black in middle-class America, you're probably wrong. You have more to learn, maybe a lot. 6 years ago, my guest wrote an article titled Justified Anger. It was featured on the front page of a local paper in the liberal town of Madison, Wisconsin. It shocked a lot of people and led to a dramatic response. Welcome to Insights. I'm Dick Goldberg, and with me, Dr. Alex G. He's been the lead pastor at the Fountain of Life Covenant Church, a multiracial, multi-class congregation, for 32 years. He's also president and founder of Nehemiah Corporation, an organization designed to reduce racial disparities and develop black leaders. After that article 6 years ago, over 1,000 non-black allies were recruited from Nehemiah's work. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Alex. How are you this morning?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I've been looking forward to this.
Oh, my pleasure. So maybe we can go back to 6 years ago and tell us what motivated you, if you would, to write this article.
Dick, I really wrote that article out of sheer frustration. I noticed Madison changing. My family's been here for 50 years. And I noticed that as it's become more diverse, as the African-American community has grown, it seems as if the racial tensions have also increased. And Madison's stopped feeling like the community I had grown up in. So a number of things happened to me along the course of the way. My guidance counselor told me back in high school I wouldn't get into Wisconsin. My daughter's guidance counselor at the same school at here in Madison told her she wouldn't get into Wisconsin. She just has recently been admitted into a PhD program and a master's program.
Can we pause right there?
Sure.
Why do you think that is?
Why do I think they told us?
I mean, maybe it's an obvious answer, but let's flesh that out a little bit.
They didn't think we were college material.
Simple reason, right? Because you're black?
Well, they didn't have a lot of black students coming from West High School to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. But my mom had attended this school. But my daughter was a National Honor Society student. She was on the honor roll. My daughter was taking AP classes and was told not to apply to Wisconsin.
That's unbelievable.
I had to get the principal involved.
That's unbelievable.
The principal changed. That same counselor also told my daughter.
The counselor knew this, that your daughter was taking advanced courses and so on?
I would assume that's her job.
What year was this?
This was 4 years ago.
What?
4 years ago.
This is liberal Madison, Wisconsin.
Sure. Sure, Dick. And what's surprising is that you're surprised.
I am surprised. I mean, I know there's racism,
sure,
but that degree,
well, because
extreme.
What happens is we talk about the children who are not up to MMSD academic standards. What we don't talk about are the children of middle-class African Americans who are told in each of the high schools, don't go to Wisconsin, go to Madison College, go to a 2-year college, go to a technical college. So everyone is fed the story that students who don't have the grades they need to graduate are all of a sudden wanting to break bad their senior year and go to major Big Ten schools. But no one's talking about what we talk about when black folks huddle up and say, guess what they told my child? And so, I mean, you're a guidance counselor. I used to be an academic advisor for the University of Wisconsin. Yeah. If a student came in to see me, it was my job to look at their grades before talking with them, before advising them. Now, when my daughter went back and asked for a letter of recommendation, she was asking for a letter of recommendation when she was told this. But when she asked for a letter of recommendation to Whitewater, the guidance counselor was willing to give her one. Looked at her grades at that point and said, wow, you're a good student. Why aren't you in the gifted and talented program? And started asking her all of these questions. It was the same counselor told her it was too late in September to join the National Honor Society. I went online and found out that the deadline was October 15th. She told my daughter in the first 3 weeks of high school, her senior year, that it was too late to join the National Honor Society. So she knew my daughter was in the National Honor Society. So,
do you think that person knew at all they were being racist?
I don't know, and that's part of the problem. I don't have the energy to try to figure that out. I have to teach my daughter how to navigate that and not let people, for whatever reasons, dictate your outcome. And the reason why I'm purposely not listening is so that question can go unanswered and the listeners can ponder for themselves. Because if I say she was freaking racist, then your listeners are going to say he's angry, he's black. Mm-hmm. It may not have had anything to do with that. But imagine having those kinds of microaggressions every day for your entire life. You're articulate. You're smart. You should do this. You shouldn't do this. You should run for this. You shouldn't run for that. You should start this. You shouldn't start that. And so I don't know. But what's exhausting is that I don't know and that I don't have the energy. When I walked into the Madison Club, an organization, I'm on their board of directors now. Thank you very much. But when my first time there, I walked in with a suit and a tie for a presentation. It was one of my first times. A woman exiting the building handed me her car keys and told me where her car was parked.
Oh my!
She thought I was the valet. The valets wore uniforms. They wore coveralls, and the guy in the valet booth had a baseball cap on, and he looked like a valet. There was nothing about me that looked valet-esque.
You mentioned angry black man. I remember reading, you talked about giving a speech in front of 400 or 500 Rotarians, and after the speech, a woman came up to you and gave you the compliment, "Thank you, I enjoyed your speech, and I'm so glad you're not one of those angry black men."
Sure, that was actually the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. That's when I started looking for an outlet for writing my scathing letter.
Really?
It was at that point where I realized she missed the whole point of my talk. And I said, why would you think I'm not angry? Of course I'm angry. And then she compared me to another black influencer. I know, but you're not angry like, and then she named someone. And I said, I am angry like that person.
That must be a high blood pressure issue.
I've got high blood pressure.
You and a lot of black people, right?
Yeah, well, we might have to do 2 shows, Dick. But I mean, I'm actually working with the School of Medicine here at the University, School of Medicine and Public Health, because there's scientific proof that the microaggressions due to racism is causing black people to contract degenerative diseases and die, contracted earlier than their white counterparts and die sooner than their white counterparts.
I've got a tough question for you.
Mm-hmm. So yes, to answer your question, yes.
Never addressed this issue. African Americans have higher blood pressure, and we get it. Just from what you're saying already,
right.
If you don't get it, you're not listening.
Right.
But they have a lower suicide rate.
You know what's really interesting? Historically, the numbers are growing of suicide among younger black folks.
Oh yes,
which is sad. My sister is an educational consultant, a former Dane County social worker.
Yeah,
she works with she works with black youth, particularly black girls from kindergarten through high school. 3rd grade girls are telling her how they would commit suicide.
No kidding.
They're talking about what objects they would use and the pressures that they're enduring. That was not even discussed largely. I'm 55 when I was a kid growing up. So you're right. Traditionally, that has not been it, because I think there's been a survival mechanism that's been passed down from generation to generation. No matter what, don't let them see you sweat. No matter what, you get there early. You stay the latest. You're the sharpest, fastest, smartest, just so you can still be average in their eyesight. That's how we're trained as African Americans. And so I think that's why suicide has not really been an option historically, for many people and for many black people, and the fear of who will take care of my children. Because in cases where moms are doing that, I'm sure there were times my mom wanted to check out, but she thought, who's going to take care of my children? And so I think being driven by the need to nurture the next generation was very, very important. And then I think, Dick, back to your original question, being pulled over by the police in my own church parking lot, and having my white associate pastor be asked to corroborate my story, to confirm my story as to who I was and why I was there.
A little more detail.
I have a standing prayer gathering with my team.
What time of day are we?
9 p.m. every Saturday night. I've been doing it for 20 years. I mean, we miss Saturdays, but this is a standing 20-year meeting. My associate pastor, Kevin, was in the parking lot. No one else was there. I pulled in about 9:05, and 2 police cars came in behind me. Wow. And they pulled me over, put their lights on, pulled me over. I just left my mother's house visiting her. She lives on Fisher Street. At the time, she lived on Fisher Street. And they said, we just got a report that a red car was going the wrong way down Fisher Street. I said, well, my car's black. Secondly, Fisher Street is a 2-way street. I grew up on Fisher Street. So what do you mean going down the wrong way on Fisher Street? Who are you? What are you doing here? I'm the most tenured clergy person in Madison. And my name's on the sign. I have keys to the door. Kevin gets out of his car to walk towards us to make sure that nothing weird is happening. He's a white gentleman, but he came to Madison to get a master's in African American history. So he knows a little bit about the history and the scenario that could ensue. So he walked over to make sure nothing happened. Not once did they say, get back in your car. Who are you? Show us ID. I could see him in the rearview mirror standing next to the cop, just talking casually. Mm-hmm. That was my second time being pulled over. First time in broad daylight, in front of Park Bank on Park Street. And when I asked the officer why I was being pulled over, he refused to talk to me. He said, I can't talk to you. Let's wait until we run your plates. But when they pulled me over later, they stood. I looked in my mirror and saw him and Kevin talking the whole while the other officer talked to me and had a flashlight.
Did they apologize?
First time they didn't. They said, you might remember these days, they said, we're part of Blue Blanket. What else do you want us to do? This is how we find drug dealers. What else do you want us to do? Don't you want your community safer? So no, they didn't apologize. They basically told me to shut up for complaining. Second time, I had to name drop. 3 officers were part of our congregation. I had to say, hey, I know this person. I know Corey. I know Jerry. And they said their first and last names. And they kind of got that, oh crap look on their faces. And just said thank you.
Is it every day?
I don't get pulled over every day.
No. I mean the microaggressions, the feeling of every day?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I had Noble Ray on speed dial. I called him.
No, he was the former police chief in Madison.
Chief in Madison. I'm sorry, yes, former police chief. And I got his voicemail and left a message. So after between that, and the Rotary experience, I was connected with someone at Capital Times, Paul Fanlin.
Newspaper here.
Yeah, local newspaper. And started telling my story. I really don't think Paul was tracking the story at first until I mentioned another incident where I said we had just built an addition to our church, and I walked in one night and heard someone throwing furniture around. And I thought it was our custodian, but he doesn't throw furniture around. And so I yelled out his name and someone replied, but it didn't sound like that person's voice. So I realized we had been broken into, and I thought they're going to torch our building, a month before our grand opening. So I ran out, called the police department, said, my name is Alex G. I'm 50 years old. I'm African American. Here's the make and model of my car. And Paul Fannin looked at me and he said, I never think to describe myself when I call the police. And I said, I always do. And he said, I want you to write this article. I'm going to put it on the front page. I'm going to put some artwork on it. I think at that point he realized that, yes, this does happen. Like, it's just part of my training,
Do you know, I interviewed him about the education of a white liberal leader.
Oh, did you?
About racism. And he talked about, in that interview, his progress from thinking he knew something to seeing how little he knew.
Sure, yes.
So that's really why I'm interviewing you, Alex.
Sure. To see how little I know?
No. No, I want to, I'm trying to mine your experience so that really I'm talking to, I think, a liberal white audience learning things they would never really understand the depth of about walking in your shoes as a middle-class black guy.
Sure.
And how frequent this is. And you say every day. Now, you're saying that
every day for someone.
But I mean, how
yeah.
often
Sure.
do you get a little tweak, a microaggression feeling if that's coming from
Let me
because I'm
see.
black?
I was on my way to record a podcast one time, and someone dropped the N-word on me. Not to me,
No.
but in describing someone's nickname, and I said, "Please don't say that again." And their response was, "No, that's what he called himself. That's no. He was very revered." And I said, "No one's revered, and that's what you say about them." But then I have to straighten myself up and walk in to conduct business. So yes, every day. And here's the thing: I want to make sure that that your listeners, that your fan base are clear on something. I lived in Madison my entire life. You know, I was a Cub Scout, paper boy, on homecoming court, captain of my track team, student council. I graduated in 4 years. My mother did not raise me to believe that there was a racist in every corner. I was taught not to look for that. So I spent the last many years of my life not wanting to admit the microaggressions, because let's be honest, no one wants to hear a black man who lives in Fitchburg in a home he built 25 years ago with an earned advanced degree bemoaning life in middle America. No one wants to hear a black person talk about that or complain
Even
about
black
that.
people?
Well, I mean, no one white wants to.
Okay.
And so I kept it all in, because they're like, well, look at you, Alex. You're proof that racism doesn't exist. I mean, look where you went to school and look what you did. And your mom has a degree and you and your wife do, and now your daughter does. And so I held it in a lot until it just became so overwhelming. And so I don't want to convince, nor do I feel it's my job to convince anyone that racism happens every day. But the fact that you can't you can't close it down. There's no closure to it. I forgot about, or don't think about the Madison Club incident often. This is a swank downtown, private club. I don't think about that incident until someone drops the N-word on me when I'm walking into a meeting, or the gentleman who's been corresponding with you,
Your assistant,
my assistant Tyler. He and I went into a meeting, and someone looked at him and said, "Oh, you must be Dr. G." And he's young enough to be my son, but the assumption is, and even when I got the tie on, and I've had white assistants before. It's not the first time that someone has said to my assistant, "You must be Dr. G." And I said, "No, actually, my boss is." And so I'm never dressed like the assistant in those sessions. I'm better dressed than my assistant in those meetings. But someone in a shirt and collar is assumed to be the authoritative figure, or someone in the tie and suit and tie are considered to be the valet. Those things happen all the time. And if you've spent as many years in Madison as I have, you learn to sort of roll with the punches.
You didn't mention shopping.
Oh, definitely. I consider how I dress when I go shopping. And I was trained when I was very little to not have my hands in my pocket.
When you shop?
When I shop, it's funny, interesting. I shopped at a local pharmacy. I run in there. My mom lives in a nursing facility. She has Alzheimer's, and so she loves M&Ms. And so I went to get her some M&Ms a couple of days ago. And the cashier said, "Do you want a receipt? Do you want a bag?" And either I'll do one or the other, because I was taught as a young boy, you do not, under any circumstances, walk out of a store without a bag or receipt.
Really?
Because if someone assumes you steal, they'll take you from us. They'll put you in the back of some police car. They'll take you in the shop. Are
you saying if you just walk out without a bag, you'll be stopped?
No. But the thought is, in order to protect you
from that,
always get a receipt or a bag. So it's funny. I'm 55 years old. I walked out last week with M&Ms with no bag and no receipt, and I kind of chuckled and thought, "Wow, I rarely do this." Like, if I go in and get a bag of charcoal or something, I'm not gonna worry about a bag or something. But I was trained as an African American. You keep your hands on 10 and 2 if you're stopped by the police.
Keep your hands on 10
and 2. That's
10
just,
and 2.
It's like if your steering wheel were a clock.
Yeah.
Your left hand's
10
where
o'clock.
10 is and 2. But it's code in the black community. We just say, "Hey, 10 and 2." If you get pulled over, 10 and 2. My daughter knows what 10 and 2.
I was going to ask about the
is.
conversation.
So
I
it's
keep
10,
hearing
10
about
and
the
2.
conversation everyone has with their children who's African American.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had that conversation?
Oh, definitely. My daughter's African American.
Of course. What does that conversation sound like?
It's, what it sounds paradoxical. It sounds like a guy who grew up in a community not thinking about race and disparity, having to explain something like a unicorn with pierced ears and purple lipstick to my daughter. It feels
She doesn't believe it?
facetious. I don't believe that I have to say that. I can't believe that in the community I've grown up. This is not the talk. I mean, my mom told me this because she grew up in Chicago and she moved here. But we didn't have the tensions that we do now. We didn't have the dropout rate that we do now. We didn't have the crime rate. We were not known as a leader in mass incarceration as a state. Wisconsin was a different place in 1970 when we moved here.
So it's gotten worse.
Oh, it's gotten worse. The world's gotten worse. The nation's gotten worse. We're way more polarized. And it's not just due to the current president and the current administration. I did a podcast recently just saying he's a mere, in my opinion, ventriloquist puppet. He's saying what America has been wanting to say for 400 years.
Why are we more racist than 30 years ago?
I think there's more of a threat. When people are making advances, when more and more people are making advances, I think it's a threat to the status quo.
So Barack was a threat?
Oh, definitely. We thought he was either going to be assassinated or there would be a major backlash to his presidency. And so in the black community, we're surprised at how blazingly outrageous Trump is with some of his comments.
Yes.
But the fact that that the country is going in that direction is not surprising to black Americans. Because you can't have someone looking like Barack Obama coming into the White House for 2 terms. You have to, and not have America say, crap, what's going on? This was a last-ditch effort for real traditional white leaders to take their country back. Even some of the wording, let's make America great. Again.
Like it used to be.
Right. Like, my family's been around for about 300 of those past 400 years, and there's not a point at which we all said that it was, that it was all great. And so the talk of my daughter is really sad, because I never thought when my wife and I married 30 years ago that we'd have to give that talk to our daughter. We give her other kinds of talks, but not that talk.
Did she believe you when you gave it, or she said that's silly?
Definitely. Oh, definitely.
She did.
Definitely.
How old was she?
Probably when she started driving.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And again, her uncle is a police officer. My brother's a police officer in Chicago, so I'm not this anti blue kind of person. But I've seen too much, and I've had my own experiences.
Yeah.
And so, I just explained to her what she needs. To do. If you're pulled over on a dark street, and I'm sure moms tell their daughters this, but to have her, my daughter's a woman and she's black. I said, if you're pulled over on a dark street, you're driving home, put your blinkers on, call 911, drive slowly, don't flee, but do not, under any circumstances, get out of your car until you're pulled into a very well lit area. I said, do you understand me? Do not, under any circumstances, stop your car on a dark street when the police pull you over.
What if they get angry that you're not pulling over right away?
She has to drive faster.
Well, then you get all kinds of trouble for evading police.
But she'll come home. This is my only child. I'm telling you what I tell my child when she leaves my presence. This is what I tell my child. I'm hoping that the police won't do that.
Okay, so if you're in a dark area, the light goes on, pull over, lady. And you think you have to go 4 blocks to get to a lighted area. You go those 4 blocks?
She better go, because I put...
Just keep going.
Keep going. Put your blinkers on. Your hazards on. Call 911.
So to show you're slowing down.
Name,
yeah.
Say, listen, I'm being pulled over. I'm afraid. I'm driving to a lit area. I'm not fleeing the police. So that there's someone on the dispatch that's saying, just stay behind this person. It's a young female. She's looking for a well-lit area. Let it all be recorded. Let it all be for the record. Oh, and by the way, enjoy the birthday party.
Oh, my gosh. So this might sound a little naive, but what are you frightened of could happen to your 18-year-old, 16-year-old daughter? Please pull her over. Give me the bad scenario.
What do you think I mean?
Violence.
Right. And I'm not being flippant when I ask that, but I'm just wondering what.
How would that, I mean, we've heard the story, but I think it's useful to hear what's in your mind as to how it could play out.
I think it plays out. And here's what's really tricky, Dick, and this is why I really appreciate this conversation. It's tricky because I want to help people to draw their own conclusions. And when I just say, here's what's going on, people shut me down because
they don't believe it?
They don't believe it because it's not their reality.
Yeah.
And but I would ask the listeners, what do you see on television? I mean, how many of the African American men and children that we've seen gunned down have actually been armed? How many have, Tamir Rice, James Gardner, Michael Brown, how many of these folks have actually been armed? And we watch YouTube videos of white people jumping into police cars, waving weapons at police officers, and they're subdued, but they're never shot. We've even seen a couple of cases where evidence was planted on these folks. That becomes reality. I mean, white people who don't know black people believe about us what they see on the media. Why will we not believe what we see in the media? And why don't they believe what they see in the media? Because there's such a strong sense of meritocracy in this country.
Define that word, would you?
That you
What's
earn
meritocracy?
that you get what you earn. That if you work hard, you keep your nose clean. You're the first one. You're the last one to leave. You're the hardest worker. You'll be rewarded for that. There's no such thing as not being rewarded if you're the best. And so that's just not true in African American. We know that there have been times we could run faster, we could jump higher, we could outthink, we can outplan. Every black person that's a professional has a story of a subordinate they trained who became their supervisor. They trained them. Statistically, a white man with a high school education makes more than a black man with a bachelor's degree. That's just proven. And just like we've come to believe after many, many years that men and women have an earning gap, but a white man with a high school diploma will make more in his life than a black man with a degree, and probably end up supervising him. So we wish for American meritocracy because we know how to kick butt, and we know how to handle our business, and we know how to take a licking and keep ticking. But if meritocracy were a real thing, we would not have the frustration and the marching and the things that we have in the streets. Yeah, black MDs being asked, are they nurses?
How can you not be angry all the time?
Right. And what I really want to know is how can people who watch the same media, the information I am, how can they not be?
White people.
Right, white people. White people. It'll take some of the pressure off of me because this is what white people will tend to do is to say, well, let's talk about what black people are doing to black people. Well, let's talk about feudalism. Let's talk about all the wars in Europe. Was that ever called white on white crime? Let's just.
Is that shame? Is that white people wanting to get the shame off them?
The shame or the blame or that I think that's a question white people have got to answer. That's a question you have to help me with.
There's a book, White Fragility, that's kind of hot right now, discussing that very subject.
Right.
Hey everybody, hope you've been enjoying the episode today so far. This is Tyler, I'm the podcast manager.
And this is Eli, I'm the audio engineer for the podcast. And Tyler, I just had a burning question that I needed to ask you.
What's that, Eli?
How do you like your grits?
I am a grits with shrimp and cheese fan.
Oh, you are fancy.
Throw in some andouille, is that how you say it? Sausage as well?
Oh, yes, yeah. I like to go for the butter and sugar.
Okay,
so
all right, sounds cool.
I like to go full on. A little bit of salt. Yeah.
With salt too?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, why do you ask that, Eli?
Well, we've got some great opportunities for people to get involved in the Black Like Me podcast. So if you've been looking for a way to get more access to Dr. G, to get some special content, some special features of the show, you can go to patreon.com/blacklikeme and become a supporter of the show, like a friend of the show.
Oh, that's awesome. Just go to patreon.com/blacklikeme, check it out.
Yeah, and we've got those different tiers, including the grits levels that we were just talking about.
Do we have grits with shrimp and cheese?
Oh, we sure do.
Oh, my goodness.
So show some love for the show and how you like your grits, or maybe you're just a cream of wheat person. That's okay, too. Yeah. And check out the website because we've got some really special tiers that we didn't even talk about yet that you're going to want to check out. So we're going to get you back to this episode. Thanks for listening.
You teach a 10-evening course, and it's called Black History for a New Day, and you offer it to 250 people at a time, and there's a waiting list to get in there.
100 people were on the waiting list for this current class.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And what is it? They're almost all white. There's a few African Americans, and there were mainly black people, right? Mm-hmm. White people, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Can you highlight maybe 3 or 4 ideas that are critical for you to convey in that course?
Sure. First of all, the impetus for the course was that white people who want to be allies must first do work among themselves. They've got to talk to themselves about racism.
Can I tell you the problem with that?
Yes.
My problem.
Yes.
I sit around, I was in a group of white guys talking about racism. And after a while, I think, this is dumb. How can I know what I'm doing wrong? How can I know what's racist from a bunch of other white guys who have the same distortions?
So you need us to come in and tell you what racism is?
Well, I know that's bad because you're not supposed to
tell
have to
a
do that.
woman to not Google at her ass in order to know
I could
that
do
that's not
research.
right?
Well, when we say, let's take a book and read it and talk about it.
Sure.
But just getting together and talking about a racism, I thought, that's not
Sure.
going to go anywhere.
I think they don't talk about their racism. I think they talk about some nebulous racist concept, but they don't talk about how racism has affected their lives, how they've neglected to hire or raise or promote, or why they don't have any relationships that are cross-cultural. No one's in my neighborhood. I don't know anyone. So white guys don't sit around and talk about their racism. They talk about racism. We think white people need to talk about their racism.
But how much of the racism that goes on do people know they're being racist? Like you talk about economics and how
Sure.
black people overlook for white people. I doubt that people are thinking, well, he's white and he's black. I know the black guy's more qualified, but let's hire the white guy. I don't think it's like that. I think it's got to be.
You don't think it's like that for anybody?
Well, some. But
Some?
really, yeah, I
Just
don't.
like a small percentage?
Okay, I run a risk taking this on.
No.
But
That's the risk of talking to another podcast host. I'm
But-
enjoying this.
oh, good.
So, so I'm not, so I
You're not mad at
I
me,
like
not mad
heated
at me.
discussions.
Okay. But I would believe I'm not questioning there's racism, not questioning decisions are made from racism, but I'm suspecting sometimes it's unconscious racism. You're not knowing you're doing it.
Sure. And that's what we help people to understand in the history class. I mean, you're actually helping to answer your own question, because racism is not a person being a racist. Let's say, for example, if I were to say to you, Dick, I think you're a racist. I'm not saying that you're a terrorist. I'm really speaking to the fact that you've been terrorized, that you've been taught you're better, that you're smarter, you're better than women, you're better than black people. So we tend to think that a racist is a cross-burning, sheet-wearing kind of individual. Right. The fact that people are oblivious to the systemic reality is proof that they're racist, not because they get up and they want to demean other people, but because they've been taught this is just the way. I pull myself up by my bootstrap. I'm smarter than women. I'm smarter than black people. Mm-hmm. I'm smarter than these other groups. The fact that there's nothing to compare it to. This is just reality. This is how I think. This is not even to be questioned. This is fact.
But if you talk to a liberal white person,
that's proof of
they
racism.
won't say yes. They won't say, oh, yes, I know I'm smarter than black people. They'll say, of course not. All people are equal.
You think they would say that?
Yeah. But that doesn't mean they don't act in a way that's racist.
They would, but you have to ask more questions, because I've gotten a number of people. I mean, I don't need everyone to admit it, but I'll ask another question. So then, if you had a chance to hire someone, why didn't you? Why wouldn't you? And there are all kinds of other questions. Yeah, people say all kinds of things. Oh yeah, we like everybody. We don't see color until color starts dating your child, and then we see color until color moves next door. Then we see color. When we elect Barack Obama, America saw color.
No question.
So the idea that we don't see those kinds of things. And so I don't spend time and energy trying to convince people that they are racist, but I try to convince people that this system is very real. I've always looked at the world through the lens of being a male. And there are days I think I'm so open-minded. I was raised by a single mom. I grew up as a quintessential big brother to my younger sister. I now live in a home with my wife, my mother-in-law, and my daughter. I know how to put the toilet seat down. There are things that I just see because I'm male, that my wife will say things to me like she'll say I don't want to go to the mechanic alone, or I don't want to go car shopping alone because of how people talk to me.
Yeah, sure.
And I said, come on, honey, And then I started thinking, in another life, I was a car salesman.
Mm-hmm.
There was an attitude we had when a woman would come on to the lot alone. And so I started thinking, why was I so quick to tell my wife this doesn't exist? Like who did that help? Why did I need to shut down her argument? I think if we just listened, why it's so hard for so many folks, even my liberal friends, to believe that a person can be black and the best for the job and not hired. They probably think it's got to be some other kind of reason.
Well, Alex, how can it not be something unconscious? Your liberal friends, if they're doing the hiring and somehow they're discriminatory, do you think they know it, or do you think it's unconscious?
Oh yeah, then what do we get? Then why do white people holler nepotism? You hardly ever hear black people yelling nepotism. But they're like, no, that's the best qualified person. This is my cousin Chuck. This is my nephew. We know when people aren't qualified. We know that we make choices. So if we can make it based upon blood and DNA, why would we not? We've made every decision based on on race. We made housing decisions based on race. The FHA made its lending practices.
Absolutely.
Tacoma has stated here in Madison, Wisconsin, that in the 40s you could not live there if you are of Ethiopian descent, is the wording they used. Sherwood Hill said if you're black, you cannot live in the community, and Conrad Elvium signed off on one of those ordinances.
In the 50s, even the federal government would redline for FHA loans.
Exactly.
So,
Well, and they were that way even when they designed them back in the 20s,
right?
Where maybe only 2% of those loans would go to black people. So all of a sudden now, because it's 2019 and we've hired Barack Obama and we've cheered for LeBron James and we watched Oprah, we think we don't make decisions based upon race. Oh my gosh, when did we hit the reset button? When did we hit the wake up button? So to think that, oh my gosh, clutch the pearls, there's no way we can make decisions based upon race. We have always made decisions based on race in this country.
Temperature's going up, and that's okay. But
definitely, I was black and angry when you invited me in here.
I know.
Now he's showing up. Let's go, Dick. But I'm saying this is my reality, because after we're finished, it's an interview with you. It's a life with me. I've got to go back and teach and preach this.
Yes.
I've got to talk about this. So my damn temperature goes up because this is my freaking life.
Yes.
And I live in a community that thinks that this doesn't exist. And that's why in places like Wisconsin, our friendly upper middle class black people who you all think are safe are building homes in North Carolina and Mississippi in the South, because they're getting the heck out of Dodge, because we're asking ourselves the question right now. I asked Dr. Harris this question in an interview with him. He's a leader, that 83-year-old man who was born here in Madison. I asked him, did you make a mistake raising your children in Madison? And this man is my mother's age. He's been a role model and a example in my entire life in this community. He said, yeah, I think we did. So imagine, we made a decision raising my kids here.
Because it's more racist than other places.
Yes, his mom started the South Madison Neighborhood Center, which is now known as the Boys and Girls Club.
Okay.
He was born here. His family has worked here. His family bought 8 parcels of land on the south side of Madison because they couldn't buy it in Tacoma and Sherwood. He went to apply for a job after getting his undergraduate from Wisconsin in 63 at Dane County Human Services, and a sheriff escorted him to his car. The receptionist said, we would never hire anyone like you because our clients would not allow it.
Wow.
We have flocked to this place. We have built, we have worked, we have toiled, we've paid taxes, we've built homes. We have made the community better and safer. And then we've got black people looking back saying, one of the biggest mistakes in my life was to stay here and raise my Alex, kids here. That's why
most of our audience is not in Madison. So I'm trying to understand racism from a national viewpoint, and
if you think of a Berkeley, if you think of a college town that is also the seat of city, county, and state government, if you were to think of a place like that, big college town, maybe a Lincoln, maybe a Columbus, if you think about those kinds of places, those kinds of community, it's a place that's very nice. We do not have boarded up buildings. We've got lots of grass. We're surrounded by 4 lakes. We have 800 intramural athletic sports teams. It is an ideal place to live for white Americans. It's a tale of two cities, but we have greater black infant mortality than many third world countries who are at war.
In Madison, Wisconsin.
We are the most segregated state, and we hide it.
This article came out 6 years ago, and then a lot happened after that article. Has anything productive happened that's maybe reduced any of this issue, made anything better?
I think 6 years is a short span for a significant litmus test for something that's been brewing for 100 years. Mm-hmm. But I think, I don't know. There are days I feel like it is because we're talking about it.
Yeah.
But, Mayor Soglin, our mayor, local mayor, he just lost the election last evening. But in a debate 2 weeks ago, he said, Madison doesn't have a racism problem. He said it's not a racist city, which makes me as an African American ask, well then, why are our children being told not to go to college here? Why do we have the worst disparity between black and white students and the worst economic disparity? Are black people genetically inferior? To what do we attribute these atrocious realities? If there's not a problem of racism, then it must mean it's us. And so there are days I feel like we're having discussions. We have 1,000 people who've gone through our history class. So many of them have worked to become mobilized to organize future history classes. It takes 40 volunteers to run our 9-week history class, but those 40 folks are graduates from other history classes. And then they're also asking how they can lead book groups, or how some of them have become court observers for how treatment happens inside Dane County Circuit Courts. So we're trying to mobilize them to have a small, subtle ripple effect. And the aggregate response would be more than a small, subtle ripple effect, but to each have an impact in their world. So I think people are more aware. I think there are more folks who have considered themselves liberal, but were not in touch with African-American issues, history, thought. The whole purpose of the class is not just realize what happened to me, but why it was left out of your history books. The real question, I'm paraphrasing this, but James Baldwin said, to the extent that white America does not understand Black America, it does not know itself. Because so much of what's been built up for and in the white community has been in resistance to Black excellence. And even after slavery ended, we had Reconstruction and Jim Crow and separate but equal. So there's always been a response as Black people have progressed. And so in a community like Madison that swears it has no problem, the statistics, the Race to Equity report, the data shows while we're singing, we're fiddling while Rome is burning.
Let me ask you a question. This is a little off.
Sure.
You have white friends and Black friends.
Some of my best friends are white.
I heard you say that when we talked. I appreciate that, Alex. Thanks for making me feel better. But can you be as close to a white friend as a Black friend?
Depends on the white friend and the Black friend.
Oh, so it's possible.
Oh, definitely.
I'm a therapist, so I'm kind of. It would seem to me
you're diagnosing me right now, aren't you?
No, I tell you if I was.
I'm teasing.
But it would seem to me, because how can that white person fully know the Black experience you have? I would think to be close to someone, you have to feel they know you really deeply.
But I have white friends who know me deeply, who I've talked to. I'm very open with.
Okay.
They don't try to change my mind or talk me out of things. And they don't have to always agree. They don't believe that everything I experience is the way I take it, but they understand that I'm not making the incident up, that it happened.
Yeah.
The interpretation might be different. But I also think that just because someone is of European descent, they're Caucasian, does not mean that they bought into a system of whiteness and white supremacy. Because when I think of whiteness as a sociological context, it really was a status given to people of European descent so that they could put down their background of being German or French or Norwegian, to come together to form a team that's just called America. But Black people were not allowed into that team, because that team was said, you can have an FHA loan, but folks who are non-white, who are Black, they could not. So it became a real us and them, because America was too afraid that if you have the Irish, fighting, another group, the British or the French or the Germans, then you can't really build this American empire. And so, but we still needed a subclass in order to do the work to build this superpower called America. And so this corporation built itself into a world power by deleting one of the largest lines in a company's budget, and that's personnel.
With everything you're saying, if people listening who are white want to feel, for lack of a better term, they want to be an ally, what do you say to them?
Folks who go through our history class for 9 weeks are still referred to as would-be allies. Because an ally doesn't just watch Eyes on a Prize series or watch Roots or read a Maya Angelou book and say, I get it. If you don't know anyone who's Black, you can't be an ally any more than you can say you're an MD and you've never seen a patient.
Okay. How do people who are living in a white world get to know closely someone who's Black?
Dick, they know where Black people are. That's how they hire their domestics. They know where Black people are. That's how they hire their gardeners. White people know where Black people are.
Well, what do you do? Walk in the neighborhood and say, I'm looking for a friend?
How do you meet white friends? Because everyone you know are not your neighborhood. Not everyone in your neighborhood. I've been around white people my whole life. They know people who don't live on their street and in their neighborhood. South side white people knew east side white people. So this stuff about I know people in my block is bullshit.
Uh-oh.
It's if you want to meet somebody, listen, white people went to the moon.
Yeah.
White people can do what they want to do. White people built ships and went to Africa. White people built empires in Europe. White people can do whatever they put their mind to. That's the benefit of being white. If someone wants to meet me, they can't. Eli met me. He came and sat in my office. He called me up and said, hey, I don't know any Black people. I want to make some movies. I want to do some good work.
Well, he had an
Eli's my
entree.
engineer
He had an
producer.
entree. I mean,
But
I can't. Alex,
but he emailed me. But I'm saying let's not complicate it, Dick. I'm saying people are finding black people when they want chauffeurs, babysitters, domestics, window cleaners. We know what black people are, and then they send their kids to school and say, why are the black kids sitting together? Because the white parents are sitting together on their patio.
Well, I get it. If they're my classmate, I get it. I can befriend a classmate. If they're working in the same setting, but I have to be somewhere in contact with African Americans to make a friend.
Exactly.
I've heard people, ministers say, go to black churches. That's the way to make black friends.
That's one way.
Yeah.
That's one way.
Okay.
But let's say, for example, if you're a school teacher, there are associations for black school teachers. If you're a sociologist, if you're a therapist.
And join those?
Join those. Feel what it's like to be in my world. You didn't see anybody black today in this facility, but this is part of my life. So I'm saying if white people really want to do that, they can find professional associations. And there are more black people in Madison, Wisconsin than in the history of this country. Yeah. So if someone ever wants to find a black person to meet them, they could. But the point is, folks want black people to somehow come to them. They don't want to go out of their own way. So tell me what to read and what to write. I'm not going to make this easy for white people because white people are not sitting in their homes trying to think about how to make this easy.
You must get a lot of people who are white that want to be your friend because they want to. They want to be.
I do, and I make it hard to see if they, what they're really about. But what's so interesting, Dick? I'm often called a black leader in this community, and I'm a leader who's black. But the truth of the matter is, there are probably more white people listening to what I say than black people.
Why is that? Why is that?
Because there's more white people.
Oh, okay.
Because I have cross-cultural appeal. Yeah. But I would never. But still, because of the demographics, like my listeners on my podcast, on Black Like Me, majority of them are white. But folks rarely call me a leader. Period. I'm a black leader. They have no idea how many black people listen to what I'm doing, but I can tell you how many white people have downloaded my podcast. Mm-hmm. And so it's very interesting. But when I want to meet other people, just because a white person lives next door doesn't mean I want to know that white person.
Right.
So I've got to join the Madison Club, and I meet new white people. I used to go to Rotary, but there are places I go to put myself out to meet folks. White people made a decision, and I mean this in general. I don't mean every white person. So I need your listeners to understand this. They do not live next door to black people because business, realtors, banks, and the U.S. government said that it was not to be so.
Yeah, it's a pattern.
For a major reason. Do you know why they didn't want us living next door?
Why black people don't want to live
next door?
No,
why white people didn't want us living next door?
Because they're bigoted.
But do you know why they're bigoted? They're afraid that your daughters were going to want to marry our sons.
I see. Mm-hmm.
That's actually why lynching was set up, to really put the fear of God in black men. It was to make sure, it was to protect the sanctity and the purity of white women. And so if we live together, we're going to sleep together. And so white people have to first understand why there are no black people in your neighborhood. Don't ask me to tell you where black people are. We're where you put us. We're in the bush here in Wisconsin, in Madison, which is where the Italian and the Jewish and the black community lived. We are put in the inner cities. We're put in these other places where we could afford to live because we couldn't get FH loans to live in the suburbs. And we were paying more in inner city Brooklyn than white folks were paying in the suburbs. So let's first understand why blacks and whites don't live together. If you don't live together, you don't go to the same schools. If you don't go to the same schools, there's a difference in schools. And so let's look at why we don't. Let's look at what we remember. Let's remember those things. And then if we just say now there's no black people here, so we can't meet them, you're not looking at the real problem.
So it's on us white people to get the heck out and find African American people.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And to understand the issues, to educate yourself.
Now this is gonna be hard.
Okay. For who?
But for you. Your closing thoughts. Anything you haven't touched on to help white people understand what they might not know or what they need to hear if they really want to have the ability to be a good ally?
I would say that if folks really want to be a good ally, ask yourself some honest questions. 1, have they listened to this interview 3 times? 2, do they know any people, black people? 3, subliminally, what have they done to avoid interaction with black people? And I would say 4, how have they personally benefited from a 2-tier system, a system that's not really built on meritocracy? How have they benefited from it? Because if that's the kind of work we want white people to do, because if it's just help me feel better, help me get over my grief, help me feel guilty,
Help me not feel guilty.
help me not feel guilty. Thank you. Then that's just really a shortcut. That's just asking black people to come and do another soft shoe. But white people have got to really begin to say, okay, how has this happened around me? How have I benefited from it? How is my life different because of it? And if what African Americans are suggesting about the history of racism and these systems, that even though we stopped slavery, but we didn't stop the sense of a false sense of superiority and inferiority, if we've not stopped that, how has that wiring impacted me and my learning and my perception of other people? I think when people do that, they're ready for cross-cultural relationships. But when people want to skip steps 1 through 5 and just say, Alex, I read The Warmth of Other Suns, what do you think? Mm-hmm. I'm not willing to have that conversation because I don't want to just be a blip on someone's feel-good screen. We're weakening our economy. We're a laughingstock to the community. We've created a disparity that's going to come back to bite us on the back side, and our grandchildren are going to be further apart from unity than our grandparents were, and that's sad in a country that promotes itself as being this place where you can come and gather these tired, weary masses. It's an atrocity that at this point in time, this is where we are in America, and we don't know it.
Dr. Alex G. I think people might want to take your advice of listening to this more than once, because there's a whole lot of material, a whole lot of meat you've given us to think about. And I thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dick, for inviting me in to talk with you. I want to thank Corey Saffold and Marcus Fleming for creating the music for this podcast, my podcast manager, Tyler Nyland, my engineer, Eli Steenledge, my editor, Jeremy Holliday, and our intro and outro are recorded by Cynthia Woodland. And a special thank you to WORT Studios, where we record Black Like Me.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. You can find out more about Dr. Alex G's amazing work at www.alexg.com. Black Like Me is sponsored by the generosity of the Human Family Unity Foundation.